Wednesday Night Baseball presented by Hankook Tire comes to you from New York City. The Yankees taking on the World Series champion Royals. Coverage begins tonight at 7 Eastern on ESPN. Steph Curry is the first unanimous MVP in the 61-year history of the award after taking all 13 first-place votes. Despite the overwhelming show of support, there are some who are still throwing shade on Curry's achievement. Here's Tracy McGrady on ESPN's The Jump yesterday.
For him to be that first player to get this unanimously, I think it just tells you how watered down our league is.
You think so?
Yeah, seriously, because think about when MJ played, Shaq. I mean, those guys really played against top-notch competition, more superstars, I think, on more teams than it is in our league today.
Stephen A., is T-Mac right? Is the NBA watered down?
No, it is not. He's wrong. Like I was joking about yesterday, T-Mac is my man. We go back a long ways. I'm used to educating him about certain things, and this is one of them. T-Mac was a guy that averaged better than 24 points per game. He was no scrub. He was a star in this league for a while. He was a big-time player at one point. But the reality is that he's one of those guys. He's not from the older generation, but he's old enough where he appreciates a more physical brand of basketball, rule changes that didn't facilitate more offense, having to do the things that he did in an era where the level of physicality was still allowed to some degree. I can appreciate where he's coming from. He wasn't around when it was the early 90s and late 80s when it was really, really bad physically. But at the same time, in 2000 and beyond, certainly there was some physicality that still existed. So I would get his point if he was bringing that up in terms of a watered down game. But he said watered down players, and he is totally wrong. Let me tell you something right now. Kevin Durant can average 30 in any era. Steph Curry, regardless of how physical the game is not compared to what it was, could average 25 to 30 in any era. LeBron James could do what he do and what he has done in any era. Dwyane Wade would have adjusted in any era. Russell Westbrook would have adjusted in any era. CP3 would have been CP3 in any era. There are plenty of guys in this league that are stars, that are comparable to the stars that existed in Tracy McGrady's era. And so when he says what he says, I think that he's wrong, because I don't think it was his intent at all to come across as disrespectful. I certainly am not accusing my man T-Mac of that, because he wouldn't do that. He's not that kind of dude. But I would tell you that I think that you've got guys that look at today's game, how soft the game is called, what you're allowed to get with on offense, how strapped opposing defenders and defenses actually are. And they harbor such resentment towards the game because of what these guys are allowed to do and what has been facilitated for them. But what wasn't facilitated for the Tracy McGradys and the Allen Iversons and the Vince Carters and others, and Kobe and them back in the day, that I think comments like this emanate from that. But it doesn't make it accurate. It makes it understandable why they would say it, but it doesn't make it accurate. He's not accurate here. It is a watered-down game. He didn't say that. He said watered-down talent.
Yep, he did.
Steph Curry is no watered-down talent. Steph Curry, with that marksmanship, could be on any team in any era. That back in the day, Skip, they just would have surrounded him with goons to protect him.
I agree.
They don't have to do that now because the rules have changed.
In no way should we even think about diminishing the achievement of Steph Curry's unanimous MVP. In no way, shape, or form.
Not at all.
You know and I know, and you're with me on this, I'm the biggest Michael Jordan fan you will ever find. Do I think Steph Curry is better than Michael Jordan? I do not. I'm sorry, I don't. Can I see, is it at least debatable that the star quality of Michael Jordan's prime years in the NBA was a little above today's star quality? I guess it's debatable, but the more I think about it, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. You know, in his prime, Michael's going up against a Karl Malone, Hakeem Olajuwon, Drexler, Barkley, Magic, Shaq. Who else am I forgetting? David Robinson. Okay, but now you just listed off all those guys, starting with James Harden, who won the Players MVP a year ago. and the two guys in Oklahoma City and Chris Paul. And then if we just go back a couple of years to a healthier Derrick Rose and a healthier, younger Tony Parker and Dwight Howard in his prime defensively, wow, I don't know. It's pretty close. And yet Steph Curry has eclipsed his competition. He has revolutionized the game of basketball. He has turned it upside down to the point that a slender 6'3" point guard is dominating the game of basketball at the highest level as a scorer. Not a facilitator, he's a scorer. And he's an unstoppable scorer who can get you 40 like that. He can get you 17 in overtime like that. Even coming back from injury without his conditioning, a little rusty, 17 like that in overtime. Wow, that's revolutionary to me. So I'm glad you're with me on this. I'm sorry. I get the sort of the argument. At least it's mildly debatable. But what's not debatable is that Steph Curry is still head and shoulders above still a very strong field of competitors and stars in this league.
The one thing that I will never allow any player, former player especially, to do is to belittle in any way today's players. These brothers can play.
Yes, sir.
It's just that it's a new game, and it's robbed the defenses of being able to play a physical brand of basketball to neutralize guys. But from a skill set perspective, the stars in this league, the true stars in the NBA, can play in any era. Any era. It's just who you would surround them with. Yesterday on the radio, I brought up Patrick Ewing. Well, why nobody touched Patrick Ewing? Because he had Oakley and Anthony Mason, God rest his soul. And prior to that, Ken Bannister, Xavier McDaniel around him. Why did nobody touch Michael Jordan earlier on? Skip, you know this. When Charles Oakley was there, what was going to happen if you touched Michael Jordan? You know, he'll take a bullet for Michael Jordan. Now, you look at the bad boy Pistons, Isaiah Thomas. I'm sorry, Rick Mahorn, Bill Lambier, Dennis Rodman, James Edwards, I mean, Mark Aguirre, and Adrian Dantley. They weren't punks. I mean, look, and Joe Dumars. I mean, and Vinny the Microwave Johnson. You knew not to touch, and John Sally, of course, you knew not to touch Isaiah Thomas, or it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem.
I agree.
That's all I'm trying to say.
And by the way, we neglected to mention one big star of today's league, LaMarcus Aldridge, just for the record. Just had to throw that in.
We'll see.
Will he show up Thursday night? I don't know. L.A., live up to those initials.
I hope so. I like him. I mean, he's a good guy. I'm rooting for him. But he's got to show up in a moment like this. He's got to show up.
Got to show up.
Got to.
All right. Meanwhile, Kenny Smith is considering a job change, but does Skip and Stephen A. think it's a good idea? We'll tell you that when we come back.
And coaching his team to collectively defend LeBron James. Now, let's also take into account the fact that Kawhi Leonard essentially ascended, Skip, because even though he played well on both ends of the floor, averaging 17 and 7 with 1.6 steals a game, if I remember correctly, keep in mind that the big moment that arrived for Kawhi was in Game 3 of that finals in 2014, when he dropped 29. After the series was tied 1-1. He dropped 29 in Miami, and he outplayed LeBron James for that game where LeBron just had 22 points, and it was when Popovich was punching him in his chest affectionately, like, way to go, because he had challenged Kawhi Leonard before that to really step up and embrace the challenge of going up against the world's best player at the time. But in that final series, as I look at the numbers here, a series in which Miami lost 4-1 and were outscored by 72 points in the losses. They won their one game by 2. They lost the 4 games by a combined 72 points, which was a 70-point difference you brought up on many occasions. LeBron James, 25, 35, 22, 28, 31, and 10. And so when I look at it from that perspective, and I think about the absence of help that he had, because the Dwyane Wade we're seeing today was not the Dwyane Wade in that finals, all right? LeBron is sitting back and like, I'm going up against Kawhi Leonard with Tim Duncan before Father Time, with Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, all right, and Greg Popovich coaching against me. And what I got here, we're the reigning defending champions, but at the same time, they had let go of Mike Miller, the previous summer, if I remember correctly. Still had Ray Allen and stuff like that. but Miami had dissipated to some degree where their struggles appeared more pronounced, and you just sensed something was wrong. And so when we look at it from that perspective, it can be a bit annoying for somebody to try to elevate somebody to your stratosphere when, A, the dues hadn't been paid, B, they're in a similar position, and C, they're ignoring the precarious circumstances in which you're working under.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, you could see where LeBron would have a little resentment of the elevation of Kawhi's stardom.
No, I don't see him as having a resentment of the elevation of Kawhi. I see him having a resentment of the questions coming from reporters who are not taking the totality of the situation into consideration. If it's the equivalent of somebody asking you a stupid question. If they ask you a stupid question or something that don't make any damn sense in your mind, that may annoy you, not necessarily the player. Who doesn't know that Kawhi Leonard can play? Who doesn't know that Kawhi Leonard is a star? Who doesn't know that Kawhi Leonard is a star because of what he does, not just offensively, but primarily on a defensive end? He's a headache for anybody. Anybody. This is the reigning two-time defensive player of the year. This brother can play. Of course you got to respect him, but the problem is if somebody comes up to you and acts like, oh, it's just him against you, and he don't have anybody around him, and you're just coming up short and not taking into consideration the conditions under which you're working. That's a problem. It's a problem when that's ignored.
But you just detailed why you discount Kawhi's impact in those two finals, because he had more help, in your view, than LeBron did. So why wouldn't you think LeBron would also discount it to the point he just wouldn't even want to comment on it, yet it still validates the question. It's okay to ask him, what do you think, LeBron, of a guy who, by the way, just finished ahead of you in the MVP voting? Barely, but just ahead.
Well, I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I'm not saying that somebody presented the question like that. I'm certainly not trying to impugn reporters in that regard. I'm saying to treat him like Kawhi Leonard is better than him. I'm saying you got to take all of those things into consideration. It makes sense this year why Kawhi Leonard would finish ahead of most guys in the MVP voting. It makes sense why somebody would look at Kawhi as a viable and valid adversary of LeBron James. But when you ask the question, you also got to bring to the table why you consider it to be such, and you got to take all conditions into consideration.
Okay,
you can't just ignore the conditions.
But remember, we reacted the next day after on TNT Inside the NBA after one of the Thursday night games. On Friday, we reacted to Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith proclaiming Kawhi Leonard a superstar, and both of them said, hey, he's now the best two-way player in basketball. If my memory serves, I think they both did. So why wouldn't reporters then ask LeBron, what's your view of Kawhi? Not that they're... Yeah.
I apologize. You're right. I'm wrong about that because I'm thinking along the lines of just like that reporter the other day that asked Damian Lillard that question about you. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about questions of that magnitude. I totally forgot about Barkley and Kenny Smith bringing up the comparisons. And if a reporter rolled up to LeBron and asked it in that fashion, I definitely think it's valid. I'm just thinking of folks going up to a superstar the caliber of a LeBron James and saying something about this guy, trying to antagonize him, when in fact you're not taking all of the challenges into consideration. I look at the conditions under which somebody plays. I covered Allen Iverson, Skip, for 10 years. Who did he have to play with offensively? I know he shot 41% from the field. But if you looked at the team that he was playing with offensively, because defensively they were stout, but offensively, if you looked at the team he was playing with, it's a miracle Allen Iverson shot 30%, let alone 41. So I'm just saying you take those things into consideration when you go up to these guys and ask questions that touches on their greatness. That's all I'm saying.
Got it.
All right, speaking of Kawhi, bottom line, are the Spurs done? Skip and Stephen A. will answer that question when we come back.
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up.